this Harvard report is the state of the nation's housing in 2023, and it kind of characterizes a lot of the movements in the market that have happened in the past year. So a lot of what's happened in 2022 they kind of covered, and the status, what we're facing now, as well as what they think the outlook, at least for the near term in the future. Appropriately enough, they did signal the cooling markets for home buying and renting, according to the report. And I think it's more accurate to say, now they do call it cooling. I would definitely say it's more accurately cooled off than actively cooling. The month-over-month growth for both single-family prices and multifamily rents are much more positive than the year-over-year numbers would indicate. Actually, I almost made a social media post about this. The Case-Shiller Price Index reported its April numbers recently, and we'll get to that later in this episode. But these headlines are almost comically contradictory. Now you can kind of see here. We've got home prices increase again, signaling a recovery. That's from Yahoo Finance. And then the Wall Street Journal says, oh, no. U.S. home prices actually posted the first annual decline since 2012. If you look at Barron's, U.S. home prices fell. If you look at MarketWatch, home prices are rising. If you look at Scripps News, they have actually dropped. But then Bloomberg actually say that they recover. So which is it, Addison? Are they? I'm so confused.
I like to wrench that this report threw into all this kind of charcuterie board of options on the housing market. They had said that they said home prices fell.
Yeah,
but mortgages, like the cost of debt and everything, increased. So just because home prices fell, people still couldn't afford.
Yeah, they're still making higher payments, and that's a really good point. The amount of money that people are paying, that's higher. And even if it was even, now I will qualify it and say that the monthly numbers show growth. But when you look at the year-over-year numbers, that's you're including the real unambiguous slowdown that we experienced in the latter half of 2022 and the first month or so of this year. So yes, compared to last year, they are down. But if you do look at the monthly numbers, and we're going to go over that when we go over the Case-Shiller, it's actually above average month-over-month price growth for home prices, and they're only taking through April numbers, so maybe things have improved even since then. So we'll know that in a couple months. It also should be noted, and I'm back to kind of the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies report. Now, this source is not really writing to an audience of investors or from the perspective of multifamily owners. Affordability is a big concern. They talk a lot about, I think that one of their missions is to address these housing problems and try and figure out ways so that everyone can get housing. I don't think that they would disagree with me saying that that's one of their goals. So it does signal, with that in mind, it does signal the lack of affordability continuing for home buyers and renters alike. There is it doesn't matter that prices have gone down. It's still unaffordable. And, from a historical level, they're elevated, plain and simple. So even though that it acknowledges that homeowners gained equity over the past few years, there's still a challenge for people that maybe want to buy their first home, for people that are struggling to afford rent. These things haven't gone away. Well, not at least in like a meaningful way. So they're still kind of figuring that out, and they have a couple solutions or proposals, I guess. But it's still a huge problem that more or less defines the market. I think it continues to characterize the market.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going off the top of my head, trying to remember the exact specifics in the article.
Mm-hmm.
They started off by saying that the kind of painting a rosy picture of the housing market, but then when they break things down, it, I think, paints a more realistic picture than a lot of people probably assume is the case and know or have a strong feeling that this is going to be the condition of the housing market moving forward.
Yeah.
The bulk of people that are homeowners are, the baby boomers and older generations.
Mm-hmm.
And they had said that while there's a little bit of a pickup with millennials, first-time home buyers, that's pretty positive. That's decreased. And we talked about how a lot of people now, it's almost starting to trickle into the apartment market in the sense that you don't have as many people going out and buying an apartment, living on their own. The conditions of the last year or so has caused a lot of people to either stay at home with their family or double up, triple up in terms of roommates.
Yeah, I remember I talked to you earlier, maybe it was yesterday or this morning, and there is maybe an unspoken expectation that aging baby boomers maybe that will result in a housing surplus. But I don't think it's going to be so straightforward at all. I don't think that all of a sudden, all this huge chunk of the population is going to suddenly leave their houses empty and give them away for free to, beleaguered millennials. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and then going back to a report that was on this episode, I would probably say about a month or so back, I think the thing that a lot of experts overlook on when they make these reports is, for example, what you were showing, the previous headlines and the difference between them, whether home prices rise or they fall, there is still that issue that I had mentioned of, they fell, but if people can't afford to pay the mortgage, it doesn't matter how cheap you make the house. And on the flip side, housing price, you can drop mortgages like as we saw in 2020, 2021, but then you have a bunch of people that have the free cash that drive the home prices up.
Yeah.
And I think as we continue to see younger and younger generations come out of college, enter the workforce with large amounts of debt, whether that, more than likely being student loan debt, any sort of free money that they have, if they get it, is probably going to be, that I'd say previous generations were using out of college to make a purchase on their home.
Mm-hmm.
They're either not going to have that available cash, or it's going to go to, I would imagine, probably buying a car before buying a house.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And I also think that, when it comes to housing demand in general, there are some demographic elements that they note. It's not just aging baby boomers, but there is a lack of, a kind of a low birth rate, really, such that it, they make this point a couple times in the report where immigration is pretty much the quote is, immigration has recently emerged as the primary source of population growth nationwide. Higher home prices are expected to make home ownership more difficult for large groups of the population, and the apartment market will have to be there to meet this consistent housing demand, like you said, especially with high interest rates. But again, like when we're talking about housing demand, it is going to be still elevated. I think, I'm not sure how much discussion there is about the broader demographic pressures. Now, this is, maybe the third or so major publication that I've seen to kind of note this impending issue of the kind of demographic. It's not a cliff, but it's not a great, it's not a great situation that we're in. And I'm going to be interested, and I'm always on the lookout for more of these longer term outlooks on, where are we going to go? And housing demand, there is a shortage now, but I said this 3 years ago. What if we build so much to meet affordability, and then we overbuild, because then 10 years from now, there's not enough people to fill those. So it really just crashes. I don't think that's going to happen, because builders are always kind of adapting to current situations and stuff. But it is, it's becoming a little bit harder to predict. And that's another point that they make, is that immigration is so variable, and immigration has emerged as the primary population growth driver, not because we've suddenly become more permissive in terms of immigration or we're letting more people in. It's just that birth rates are getting lower, and this baby boomer generation is on the older side. So it's more likely that generation, which is so large, is going to shrink, and there's not a subsequent generation, especially of like household formation years, that is going to pick up that slack.
Well, the other, and this is pure speculation, I didn't think of this until I got in here, but one thing that I am wondering is when HOA fees really hit their stride, when they became a big, widespread thing,
mm-hmm.
because there's plenty of times where I think a lot of people definitely do it. You go on Zillow, look at homes that
mm-hmm.
in a different life I'd own.
Oh, yeah.
But there's funny stuff even in Indianapolis where you could take a condo, for example. If you look at how much money it is in terms to purchase, and then how much money it is that you're going to be paying monthly on a mortgage, you're probably looking at it from that perspective, thinking, okay, I can stomach it, or at some point, maybe a few years down the line, I can pay for that. And then you see how much the HOA fee is, and it's like, I can pay the mortgage, I can pay the HOA fee. I can't pay both.
Yeah, you can see that. Look, I mean, this monthly mortgage payment, it seemed to have dipped a little bit, but it is it's trending upwards, which to me says that there is still a healthy demand, and that's another thing too. Maybe nominally, the home prices have dipped a little bit, but if you look on a kind of an absolute basis, it's still pretty even. One thing, when it comes to kind of broader issues of housing demand is that there's this interesting passage about remote work, and it's something that we covered last week on the Gray Report. But they say that looking to the future, one of the primary drivers of domestic migration, and in turn the geography of housing demand, will be remote work. And here trends are still evolving. Some workers are returning to the office, others are continuing to work from home, and still others are employing some combination of the two. Regardless, it is clear that the aging and growing diversity of the population, coupled with some workers' increasingly flexible work options, will change the shape of housing demand and necessitate housing adaptations. Now, I laughed a little when it said change, because that's kind of a cop-out. Either demand goes up or it goes down. I mean, maybe changing shape is fine, but when you get down to the when you get down to, like, I want to know, are more people going to want homes or more people not going to want homes? I am thinking that remote work will lead to a longer term, especially if it persists, is going to support higher housing demand. I will say that things seem to be in the negotiation stage when it comes to working from home norms. There's not a settled status quo. There's still some bosses trying to reel people into work. But I wonder if unemployment goes up, if remote working becomes less prevalent due to workers having a little less leverage. But the final thing I'll say is, to call back to last episode, I said that I was looking for a couple of sources on the benefits of working in an office, and there were a couple actually, and I'll share them. I'll share them in the notes to this episode. But one was from Harvard, and there was another report as well that, again, I'll be chasing these down, but basically it talked about the proximity effect, which is, you're gonna promote the guy that's around you probably than the guy that you see over a computer screen. All things considered, if they're exactly the same, I'd be 90. I'm gonna promote the guy that's there in person than over the screen. If everything else is the same, I think that's not. I don't even think it should be called proximity effect. It's just like, I react to my environment. If you're around, then I'm going to see, I'm going to perceive you more. I'm going to notice your accomplishments more than if someone is, working where I'm just not in the same room. We're not in the same building. I think it's a much more simple, and maybe even fundamental thing than a discrete proximity effect. I think it's just like organisms react to their environment. And if you're in that same environment, then then you probably will progress a little bit more quickly. But
you tend to favor people that you know and like, and you're going to know and like someone, well, maybe not necessarily like, but you're going to have more interactions with someone you're seeing every day versus someone that's across the country and you're only talking on meetings. I really wonder, though, where I kind of pause to get behind the whole work from home situation in terms of how it affects the housing market or how it's going to affect broader trends, because that didn't really seem to become a major issue until COVID, and after COVID, and how people have gotten out of it in terms of going back to the office or how work policies have changed. I'm wondering, moving forward, for a lot of companies, especially if it's like a Deloitte or EY, where they're constantly getting a steady stream of new employees every year. I should say new employees out of college every year. How many places are setting the standards with their first kind of set of new people new to the workforce out of college? How many employers are saying, like, no, you're in the office? Yeah, we can't convince the 40-year-old that's been working here forever to give up the whole remote status, but you don't know what the work environment is like. And this is like a huge, small companies are going to have to adapt or whatever, but some of the big name jobs, if you're Goldman Sachs, I'm sure the manager, whoever's making this decision at Goldman Sachs, has it in mind that there are plenty of people that will do this job in the
Yeah.
office every day. If you don't want it, that's fine. I know for a fact I can find somebody.
Yeah.